You're listening to the Get Meal Prep Show, a podcast about meal planning strategies that help you positively nourish your body, learn about nutrition, and most importantly, get dinner on the table. You know that this is a podcast for you if you've ever thought, oh no, it's 3 o'clock and I have no idea what's for dinner. We dive deep into meal planning methods and meal planning strategies that help you prepare healthy home-cooked meals that doesn't leave you feeling like you're tied down to the kitchen. I'm your host, Susan Watson, registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and meal planning strategist for the online course Get Meal Prepped, which can be found at www.nutritionacademy.co. My team at A Nutrition Academy and my counseling practice, A Little Nutrition, has formed the Get Meal Prep method that helps people improve their eating habits by cooking whole foods and not relying all the time on convenience food products. Aside from our online course, you can work with us via our one-on-one coaching services. You can find the links to our packages in the show notes below this recording. We're so happy to have you here today and share this episode with you. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the Get Meal Prep Show on iTunes and leave a rating and review. It might not seem important, but your review can make a big impact and help us continue to deliver amazing content and keep bringing you the best meal planning strategies so that you can be the healthiest you ever. It's super easy to leave a review. You can leave a review from your podcast app. Simply search the Get Meal Prep Show, click reviews, and then write a review. We would love to hear from you. Now let's dive into today's episode. Well, welcome back. How's it going, Madeline?
It's going pretty good. How are you doing, Susan?
I'm doing good. I'm really excited about today's topic because I had put out on Instagram a question like, what are topics that you want to hear about when it comes to meal planning? And I got quite a few different responses, and this is the first podcast recording based on those responses. So, we're going to be talking about 20 easy freezer meal dinner ideas that you can make ahead. And I'm excited about talking about the different, types of meals and how it might, be different for you, cooking for one or two versus myself cooking for a family. So, it's going to be a good conversation with you today. So, busy weeknights call for make-ahead convenience. And I've been making freezer meals for a while now. I think the reality is that you can't freeze every recipe you make, and I guess freezer meals are not necessarily fail-proof. I think there's that misconception that, oh, you're on the ball because you have a freezer full of meals and you must be awesome because you're all prepped up. But the reality is they don't always all work. And I know this because probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I got an email from a friend that lives in town, and she was doing a freezer meal swap. So everybody would cook up, I think it was like 6 freezer meals of one style, and then we all got together for wine and social, get away from the kids, and we would swap these freezer meals. And there was no kind of rule other than we would tell everybody what recipe we chose so that 2 people were making lasagna, right? But what I found was that not everybody knew about freezer meals. And so I'd say 50% of them were good and 50% of them were not good because they weren't really done properly, I guess. So it was just stuff that you can't freeze or doesn't reheat well. So I've definitely had, lots of experience with freezer meals. So Madeline, can you think of any freezer fails that you've had?
Yeah, actually, I'm thinking about one that I had recently where there's kind of like multiple fails in like one dish, which is kind of sad. But because I was going through my freezer, of course, just kind of taking stock with, what was in there too. And I noticed that there was like this, what I think was chicken stew. So fail number 1 was that I failed to actually label it. So it's like, oh, that's not good. But as much as I didn't recall what was in it, I remember that when I made it, I didn't actually enjoy it. It was a recipe that like I knew, like, you try new recipes and sometimes they're great and sometimes they're just completely awful. In this case. And but I froze it anyway. And it was just something that stayed there for months, right? And so now it has like it had all like freezer burn, and just because I left it in too long. So I learned a few things. Of course, always label anything that you're putting in the freezer.
Yep.
Especially things that actually a big lesson was don't freeze things you don't like.
Yeah.
I didn't want it. I was like, I'm, preventing food waste, but
yep.
Every time I look at it,
you put it into the freezer to die.
Basically.
Versus putting it into the garbage can. You're like, well, if I put it there, I won't think about it, and I'm not wasting food by putting it in the freezer, but you put it there to die.
Basically, it died in my freezer, and I ended up just chucking it anyway, and to be like almost worse, right? Like, yeah. I don't know. So multiple fails.
There was when I was doing some of the research for this podcast, I read someone's blog, and they said, you know what, if you're gonna freeze something, if you're gonna put it in the freezer and it's already starting to look bad, right? Like if it's on its way out, don't freeze it. It doesn't magically,
fix it.
It doesn't magically get better. If anything, what we know is that the freezer degrades food. So if it was, I don't know, wilting or not even looking good or already 3 or 4 days past, and then you put it in the freezer, it doesn't magically become new again. If anything, it's even worse. So you end up just food waste anyhow. So I thought that was kind of funny. That I'm glad I brought that up. But I know one thing for certain is that most of my recent fails with make ahead freezer meals are when I took them this one time. Well, I'm hesitant to talk about it too because I really value my mother-in-law for babysitting, but my most recent fail was when I had made up a whole bunch of freezer meals, and then what I did was, if you read about freezer meals, you're supposed to wrap them in plastic wrap first, and then tinfoil and label it and put it in the freezer. So that's what I did, and then I took it out, I put it on the stove to thaw, and I left a note like, hey, can you pop it in the freezer or into the oven for 350, at 4 o'clock so that it's ready when we get home. And she did, but she's directly from the stove into the freezer, and I didn't say like, oh, by the way, there's plastic under the tinfoil. So the freezer meal went into the oven with the plastic on underneath the tinfoil, and the plastic baked to the freezer meal. And when my husband got home, because I was working that night, I wasn't home. I was, the hero that had made dinner ahead and just put it in the oven and you're good to go. So he took off the tinfoil, and there was this layer of plastic that stuck to the food, and it ruined the whole thing, right? So, so moving forward, now what I do, it's still having that airtight seal on freezer meals is really important. But what I'll do is I wrap it in tinfoil, and I press the tinfoil down on the food first, and then I'll label it, and then I wrap the whole thing in plastic just to keep the air out. Or I have still done the plastic idea where you put the plastic on first, but when I write on tinfoil, I'll put plastic underneath. Like, take plastic off for myself, for anybody else who's helping supper, for my husband, because it's just a simple thing, but I guess you don't think about it, right? It's an easy thing to screw up. So yes, if you're making a freezer meal, make sure you either put plastic down and then tinfoil and say plastic underneath, or wrap it with plastic on the outside so that to take it off and just keep it airtight. I just thought that was kind of funny. That's my most recent fail, and now we do things a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So when it comes to freezer meals, you really need to find a tried and true recipe before you fill your freezer, because not everything reheats well. So looking online, you can find recipes from bloggers that will say this is a great freezer recipe. That in itself should be good enough, but until you try it yourself, I wouldn't necessarily trust it. Or I think freezer recipe books, that have been published, they are probably more of a reliable source as well. But again, before you batch cook and make, say, 10 of these meals and put in your freezer, you want to try at least one. And also recognize that freezer meals only last for about, I'd say, maximum 3 months, and it all is based on how well you package it. For how long it's going to last. So 3 months is almost kind of pushing it. And it depends too if you're using a fridge freezer or a deep freeze on how cold it gets. So I would say you're good with doing up some freezer meals for about a month and a half, 2 months. Anything longer than that, you'd have to really, test its longevity. There's lots to consider when it comes to making freezer meals. I think we could probably do 2 or 3 more podcasts on this, which we probably will. But today we're going to talk about the different types of freezer meals that I know that I've done that I know that work well. And first I want to define what we're talking about when it comes to freezer meals, because when you look online, there's lots of different, types of freezer meals. So today we're going to be talking about uncooked or already cooked up meals, and then you let them thaw and then you put them in the freezer, because there's also uncooked, ready to thaw and then cook type meals. So for example, the 2 different styles, what you can do is you can take, say, raw chicken and put into a freezer bag and add the marinade and whatever vegetables you want, and then put that in the freezer. And that's sometimes called a freezer meal, so that when it comes time to cooking, you take it out and put it directly into a slow cooker and turn it on, and you're good to go. So that's one style of freezer meal. And then the style of freezer meals we're going to talk about today are, think lasagna. You've already cooked everything up and baked it and let it cooled off, and then you freeze it. And all you have to do is reheat. So it's called cooked and reheat style freezer meals. And I just find that for myself, those ones work a little bit better. There are lots of recipes online for the 2 different styles. And one of my concerns with some of the recipes that I saw from other websites, say namely this one, it was like a chicken teriyaki vegetable one. And Madeline, you can tell me, because I haven't talked to you about this, tell me what you think would be the concern. So it had chicken, it had the marinade, and then she put the fresh broccoli right on top of it and said, "This is ready to freeze."
Oh,
what I know. And that's, what do you think would happen if you put that in your freezer and then took it out and put it into the slow cooker?
Oh, well, the broccoli would get all degraded and just not be
right. You can't put fresh broccoli into the freezer.
Yeah.
So, and I saw this, I was like, oh, I don't like that idea. So if I was to do that, what I would have done was chicken with a marinade, and then I would have put in, say, frozen broccoli. It was already done because it's been blanched, and that would have worked out okay. But, today we're really going to talk about already cooked, ready to reheat freezer meals. And I find that because they're already cooked, there's less, room to go wrong. And it really is freezer to oven ready, versus having to, maybe thaw and put into a slow cooker and do some more steps. And for me, those are the types of convenience type meals that I need in my life, because I'm sometimes getting other people to reheat these meals. And so I've come up with 20 different meal ideas that you can cook up using your favorite recipes. We don't have recipes in this episode here, but you'll get the idea, because it's just talking about a meal idea that I know will work because I've already done. And you can cook them up, then freeze them, and then reheat them, and they work really good for weekday dinners. So let's get into some of these ones. First, let's talk about, because just to remind everybody who's listening here, I'm cooking for a family. I got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old and a husband at home with me, and I do most of the cooking. Madeline, who's home with you?
Just my partner, Brian, and me. So just 2.
And it's like, and before that, you were cooking for one, and that style of meal planning, that type of freezer meals look different than when you're cooking for a family. And the other limiting thing that you were telling me about is that you just have the freezer in your fridge.
Yeah.
Are you ever going to get an apartment style freezer? I used to have one.
And actually, we've been talking about it
Okay,
because
okay.
it is something that, like, we have we do have some space where we could have one, and I think it
Yeah.
would be very handy and useful to do, especially to utilize your freezer as a really great tool for meal planning. But
Mhm.
it just means that when I do meal planning, I have to be a bit more strategic of, utilizing and really maximizing that freezer space because it is quite small.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I might freeze might be a little bit
Yeah.
different or, yeah.
Yeah. Well, even when I was living on my own, um, I actually I had just the fridge freezer, and then I think I won through like a sales initiative or something with my job. I got these points, and I ended up getting an apartment style freezer, and it wasn't very big, but it was just enough for giving myself a little bit added space because I want a turkey too, and like you, if you want a turkey right now, what would you do? You'd have to cook it up, and you still probably wouldn't have room in your freezer for all the meat.
No, I'd have to be like, hey, mom, do you want some turkey? Like, I
Yeah,
can't store it
yeah,
all.
yeah. So I think it was like I knew I was getting the turkey, and I was like, oh, I gotta get the freezer, and it just turned into this like snowball effect of needing extra space. So, yeah, like you have to, when it comes to freezer meals, take a look at your space. There's no point in doing up all these freezer meals if you have nowhere to freeze them. So then again, we're in Manitoba. Most of the year, probably, cold storage outside or on your patio, right?
Yeah.
Not that we recommend that. It's probably not
No,
very
yeah.
safe.
It's just a
Oh,
fun joke.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's go into these 20 different meal ideas. I'm going to start off with maybe some more meal ideas that are cooked components, and then go into full out meals. So let's talk about meatballs. So I like to make pre-made meatballs and then freeze them for a variety of different types of meals. So I'll do turkey meatballs or ground beef meatballs, and so I'll freeze them just like that. Sometimes I will. Freeze them on a sheet pan first and then put them into a bag so that they're easy to come apart, or I'll just cook them up and then put them into a freezer bag. I know some people will make them all up and not cook them and then leave them that way, so that is also an option. But again, for me, for the amount of time that I have, and things being quick and easy, I prefer to cook it up and then freeze it. So Madeline, what do you like to do?
I like to do just as you said. I
Yeah.
prefer having it all cooked and ready to go, and then it just saves you time for when you are cooking it again or reheating it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just I feel like it just saves you a step.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, if you, I've done actually both, but more so thinking about hamburgers, is I have cooked up, or I've made up the hamburger mix and then froze the patties, and then I was ready to go directly from like thawing them a little bit and then putting them onto the barbecue. So it would
Mm,
be the same with meatballs. You could do that too, but you just want to make sure when you put them into the freezer that you label it. Um, raw, ready to cook versus cooked, ready to eat.
yeah,
Um,
that's
and
good.
yeah, it's important. So we talk a little bit about in our online course, Get Meal Prepped, having a freezer inventory list, which is really important. And we break it down into 4 different components, and one of them is the raw, ready to cook component. And that would be meatballs that are not cooked but ready to go to the oven, versus maybe just ones that are already cooked, ready to heat up. So with my kids' lunches, what I'll do is I'll do up the meatballs, I'll have them already cooked and then in the freezer. And when I use those yum boxes with all the different compartments,
Mhm.
and usually by Thursday, Friday, like I prep up as many days as I can, but by Thursday, Friday, I am taking out components from the freezer, and I can just take the cooked meatballs and I'll put them in their protein component of their lunches, and just directly frozen. And then by the time they get to school, they'll be thawed, or I'll do it the night before because they don't mind eating meatballs with ketchup sauce.
Oh, there.
Cold, they don't need them warmed up. So yeah, meatballs are a great freezer meal. You can cook them just like that, or you can turn it into a meal. So you can do, pasta, you can do rice, and what I'll do is I'll do up meatballs, and then I'll have cooked up rice, and I'll put that in the dish, and then I'll take frozen vegetables, and I'll put them in the dish as well, and then freeze that whole item, and then when it comes time to a meal, you can just put that in the oven and reheat it. So the next one is very simple. I'm sure everyone's done this before. If you've done any meal prep for freezer meals, is spaghetti and meat sauce. Super easy. You can do whole grain pasta, you can do regular white pasta, but spaghetti and meat sauce, I think that people kind of think like, oh, that's not very, I guess, maybe healthy or something that you can do, or they feel like it's part of the recipe rut. But, spaghetti and meat sauce, it's the core components. You got your grains, you got your protein. You'd sometimes want to make sure that you're serving a side of vegetables. So either steamed veggies or a salad would be a great way to do that. But I have probably at any given time 2 or 3 spaghetti and meat sauce freezer meals ready to go for those days when the kids just want spaghetti and meat sauce. It's quick and easy. It's quick and easy, and it's usually always a win with everybody.
Yeah, I'd say like I actually had that earlier this week, and it is something that it's a good like kind of even comfort, right? It's nice, it's simple, and like even just cooking for 2 people, like I usually make it so that we'll have it for maybe 1 or 2 days, and then there's always leftovers to freeze later, and it just saves time later on.
Yeah, and if you're really concerned about maybe healthifying it, we like to add lentils to our meat sauce.
Yeah.
Or so you can do your meat sauce and add a can of lentils. Another hack that I like to do is mushrooms, like chop up mushrooms really, really fine, or grated carrots. That also kind of expands that meat sauce, and if you're worried about making it a little bit healthier, you can do that. But I mean, straight up meat sauce or using ground turkey or ground chicken is also another good option. Okay, so cooked taco meat for Taco Tuesday. So we talked about this in the other episode. What I will do is I will cook up a large amount of ground meat, whether it's turkey or ground beef, and then I'll season it with the taco seasoning, and then I'll freeze it as is for Taco Tuesday. So I'll freeze it in plastic bags or containers. I'll label it as a cooked component ready for Taco Tuesday. I'll add it to my inventory list of what I've got in the freezer. And then when it comes down to Taco Tuesday, I'll take it out, and then I'm just adding the fresh ingredients like the lettuce and the vegetables. So that's how I prep up Taco Tuesday really easily. And the next one is cooked shredded chicken as a freezer meal. So again, it's not a full meal, it's more of a cooked component. But what you're doing is you got your slow cooker, and you're going to put either your slow cooker or your Instant Pot. You're going to put 5-10 chicken breasts in there. Cook it to the point where you can shred it, and then you can either season it that way, or you can just put the shredded chicken into freezer bags and freeze it, and then you can take it out on the day that you want to use it, and you can do it for soups, salads, stews, quesadillas, lots of different areas that you can use the shredded chicken. And I think I liked your idea with the shredded chicken, the 5-ingredient recipe. What was it for the salsa chicken?
Salsa chicken, yeah. Yeah, just using your slow cooker or the Instant Pot too. Like even if you wanted to make it 3 ingredients, just use, some salsa, get your chicken going. Maybe add some spices.
And because you have a small freezer, a freezer meal would work better for you to do up the shredded chicken with the salsa and then freeze that, because it takes a smaller space versus adding, say, like the rice or the quinoa or whatever other component you would have with that. So
yeah, anything that I can freeze flat is good.
Oh, I'll have to talk about my soup issues with freezing soup flat, but that'll be another topic we get to.
Another time.
Yeah. Okay. Chicken Alfredo. This is a really easy one. Very simple. You can make your own Alfredo sauce, or you can use the jar. But again, you can batch cook chicken. You can batch cook your pasta with your sauce. Sometimes I like to add peas to the chicken Alfredo. or even sometimes a bit of spinach. I know that some people like, no, they want to keep it simple, but you can do that and then you can freeze it. And I find that Alfredo sauce tends to work really well for reheating. But the tip to doing chicken Alfredo, especially like if you're just using jarred Alfredo sauce, is you want to make sure that the pasta has cooled down before you assemble everything. So you'll cook up your pasta, rinse it under cold water first, and then portion it out into your containers or before you mix in the Alfredo sauce. Because if it's still warm, I find that the pasta absorbs the sauce. And then you put your chicken and then you can go ahead and freeze it. And I do find that for any of those meals that have sauces with pasta, you want to go a little bit heavier, a little bit more on the sauce, because there'll still be a component of rehydration where the pasta will take on a little bit more. So that's especially with rice too. So if you do up your freezer meal and it looks like, okay, this is great, I would eat it as is. Add a little bit more sauce.
No, good tip.
Maybe add a little bit of milk or something just to keep it a little bit more saucy. Okay, taco casserole. I have a recipe on my website alittlenutrition.com for taco casserole. I really, really like this one. You can have the taco casserole as is. That's ground beef, black beans, salsa, vegetables, cheese, with the taco seasoning. You can have it as is, or you can serve it with rice, or you can, the other day I had it for lunch just on a salad. You can use the casserole and even serve it with pasta. Like it's very, very versatile. I like doing that one. If you mix the rice into it as well, you might want to again add a little bit more tomato sauce, just so that when you're reheating it, it doesn't take all the liquid. Or you can leave the rice out like I do and then just have it frozen separately and take the two out together. Lasagna. So that's a very standard one. I've done chicken lasagna. I've done chicken Alfredo lasagna. I've done vegetarian lasagna, seafood lasagna, as well as just regular, meat lasagna, lentil lasagna. Lots of different ways of doing it. Again, with freezer lasagna, you want to make sure you're making it a little bit more saucy than you would have it. But yeah, I guess if you have a small freezer, lasagna wouldn't be a good meal prep. You could probably do lasagna roll-ups and then freeze those.
I was gonna say, like, if it's and I've done that before, where if it's just like a smaller portion, like usually when I make a lasagna, I don't make like a very large casserole dish. So you can find recipes where I have a really good one. I can't remember where I got it from, but it's like just a smaller portion, so you can freeze, it doesn't take up too much space, or like I don't have like lasagna for days in my freezer.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For sure. Chicken pot pie is also a really good recipe that you can cook up, make lots of, and freeze. Another recipe I've done is pesto stuffed shells, and that's also on my website. I'll put the links in the show notes so that everyone listening to this can get a copy of those recipes. But the pesto stuffed shells are those, those big shells, the big pasta shells. And then I'll use ricotta cheese or cottage cheese with a bit of egg and pesto mixed in. And then you don't actually have to cook those ones because the pasta's already cooked and the cheese is fine. And then I'll sprinkle a bit of cheese over top and then put that in the freezer, and that will go directly to the oven as well. So those ones are good. You can also do like a meat sauce that will go in it as well. And again, you don't have to cook those ones. If the pasta's already done, you can put them directly into the freezer. Manicotti is also a good one. Shepherd's pie. This is really good, but my tip here is that it is good if you are making up a freezer meal of shepherd's pie and it's going from freezer to oven. So another fail that I'll tell you about is actually just a couple weeks ago, my husband wanted shepherd's pie, so we made some shepherd's pie and we had lots of leftovers. I'm like, perfect. I'm going to, portion it out into freezer container meals, put in the freezer, and I've got his lunch for the next couple days. So that's exactly what I did. In the morning, he took his freezer meal, which was a leftover shepherd's pie, and he took it to work. And What happened is because he was reheating it in the microwave, the topping of the mashed potatoes turns watery and jelly.
Oh, right. It would separate a bit more.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas if
Oh,
it goes directly to the oven and it's got that high heat to kind of bake it, it doesn't get all watery and weepy. So, shepherd's pie, not a great freezer meal for lunches if it's going to be heated up in a microwave, but shepherd's pie great if you are putting it directly to the oven, because I had also made extra, one for that night, but then one for a weekend at the cottage, and I have so much shepherd's pie, and I just again thawed it and put it directly into the oven, and everybody loved it. There's no issues. So that's why I was
yeah.
really shocked when he was like, "Oh God, I can't have another shepherd's pie." It was so disgusting. I'm like, "You want to tell me these things? You're my tester."
Yeah.
So anyways, that's lessons learned. And I saw what it looked like because he brought it home. He's like, "I'm not touching that." Jambalaya is also great. So again, that's rice with I like to use like turkey sausage and vegetables and a tomato sauce. So again, try to keep the sauce a little bit more on the liquid side. You can jambalaya would be good to also cook up and then put into a freezer bag and freeze that in a smaller portion, then take it out and then reheat it in the oven or the microwave. I think jambalaya would work well.
Yeah.
Yeah, any type of meat, so chicken or beef or pork that's in a sauce will usually freeze really well and then reheat well. So if you're taking a look at, say, doing up a bunch of chicken teriyaki and cooking that up and it's got the sauce, you can freeze that and put it into a plastic bag and then just take that out and reheat it. It doesn't necessarily have to go into the oven. You can do that in your microwave.
Yeah.
Um,
Even beans too, like as a meat
yep.
alternative, they freeze really
Yeah.
well. So even if you
Yep.
have a batch of like black beans, kidney beans, even if they're
Yep.
soft,
Yep.
um,
I have a lentil curry that I'll do. So like it's a lentil curry recipe, and then I'll cook that up and then just freeze the lentil curry, and then take that out and add that, and it freezes really well. So meatloaf, this is also really good, kind of like the meatball idea. Again, you can make a meatloaf and then you can either slice it up and then freeze it, which I would recommend, or you could just make up a bunch and then freeze them and then thaw them to cut them. Chicken Cordon Bleu works really well. So that's chicken layered with a bit of ham and cheese rolled up. Again, I recommend cooking it first and then freezing it so that it's a quick and easy reheat. I also find like once you've rolled it up, it's hard to tell if it's cooked right in the middle if you don't cook it first, if you do it raw and freeze it. Chicken enchiladas work really well. So I know people will say this isn't a really healthy recommendation for a meal, but hash brown casserole, like I never knew what hash brown casserole was until I went to these moms groups, and it's probably like the ultimate comfort food, I guess, at moms groups. I don't know. But it's hash browns with a cheesy sauce and ham, and it's baked. It's so delicious. But I don't think I've done it too many nights for like a weeknight dinner. But what I have done is I've done it for a weekend. For a breakfast or a like a brunch, and I have a couple of them in the freezer just because I never know if people are going to pop in, and it's something that you can just pop into the freezer from freezer into the oven, and it's a hit for everybody. And you can, if you're concerned, you can have some healthier sides, but at the end of the day, it's nice to have some comfort foods every once in a while and enjoy them. So hash brown casserole is something that definitely you can batch cook and freeze and reheats in the oven really well with no issues.
I now really want to try it.
Oh yeah.
I should have some of your freezer stock.
Okay. You've never had hash brown casserole?
No,
Oh my
never.
gosh, you have never lived life. Like I didn't know about it myself either. But again, just you can Google it. There's so many different recipes, but it's really simple. It's just hash browns. Usually, the cans of cream of mushroom soup or cream of chicken soup.
Yeah.
So it's hash browns, a couple cans of that with cheese and sour cream mixed in and then baked.
Okay. Oh.
So like literally just like it just melts in your mouth. It's delicious. I've done hash brown casserole actually with leftover potatoes. Like if I've done too many cubed potatoes, I've made my own. And then yeah, that can also go in. I know these are supposed to be dinner meals. I'm sure you can have hash brown casserole for dinner too. It's just, you know, typically I tend to have this as a breakfast meal because it just reminds me of breakfast. But then hoo hash, which is hash browns with eggs and meat and vegetables as well, is also something that would work well. Um, so yeah, you got to try that and let me know how it goes because it is so delicious.
Will do. Yeah, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
Okay, good. So the next two, so Korean beef and rice. So I don't know what, this makes it Korean or not. It was just when I was looking up recipes and looking through my master meal list, I had called it Korean beef and rice, but really it's just cooked beef. So you take ground beef in a frying pan and you add soy sauce. I use a low sodium soy sauce and ginger and garlic. And it makes the ground beef like really tasty, and you can freeze it. Almost think about like the taco meat, but using more different flavors like the soy sauce and ginger and garlic. And so what I'll do is I'll cook up some of the ground beef like that, or you could do ground turkey, and then in a freezer container or a baking dish, I'll put the ground beef with some cooked rice and some frozen vegetables, and then wrap that up and put that in the freezer, and that works really well. But you could do just the cooked component, the beef mixture, or the rice, and put those together and reheat that. And then the last one is chili. Like, we can't forget about chili. Chili
Yeah.
is so versatile. You can do more of a plant-based version where it's all beans and lentils and vegetables, or you can do one that's more meat and hearty version, or you can do a leaner one using ground turkey and chicken. Lots of different options, lots of different styles of chicky. I wanted to say turkey and chicken and chili, and it was like cheeky. um,
You blend.
well, yeah, I know. So lots of different styles of chili. And yeah, I think we can't forget about chili. It's a great freezer meal that you can cook up. You can either put in a baking dish or you can put in a plastic resealable bag as well. So that's our 20 different freezer meal ideas for weeknight dinners. And I look forward to hearing what people have to say. You can leave some comments in the comments below, or you can email us at info@nutritionacademy.co. Love to hear what you think about these. Madeline, do you have anything to add to these 20 ideas that we talked about here?
Well, I'd say like these is pretty all encompassing. Like a lot of them, like especially those cooked component ideas,
Yeah.
like having like just cooked up grains available and knowing that those can freeze well, or cooked up protein. So whether it's the meats or like beans, I know I do that a lot too, and I find that's something that you know I at least for me when it comes to my space, those cooked components utilize it a little bit more. It's nice to have already mixed dishes like chili. Like we can't forget about chili. But yeah, that's all I would really like to add or kind of summarize from it is those cooked components can.
Well, as you're
really
talking
help.
about chili, I was like, oh my goodness. Okay, so with chili, again, like you could do it up in your slow cooker and freeze it in bags. And then for chili, you can do like chili in a bun, or you can do like chili and rice, or you could do like chili and pasta. Like you can do so many different versatile ideas. One of the things my kids love is chili fries.
Oh yeah.
So like I'll cut up like potatoes and make fries, and then we do chili fries. So there's so many different things with chili, but yeah, so this is just a list of 20, but there's a lot more. We probably do part 2 as well, but 20 ideas to get started. And if you're looking for a recipe with these different ideas and you're having a hard time finding one, again, send me an email. I'd be happy to find you a recipe. If it's not already on my website, then I know of some other sources that we can find you one. But most people have their favorite version of, say, shepherd's pie, or these are very much main staples. So yeah. Okay, excellent. Well, we'll catch you a little bit later, Madeline. I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too, Susan.
Okay, bye.
See you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Get Meal Prep show. If you have any questions about today's episode, or you would like to email us, you can at info@nutritionacademy.co. We'd love to hear from you, and if you have any suggestions or different topics for the show, we'd be happy to hear from you. You can also find me on Instagram at @alittlenutrition, and I have lots of meal planning photos and tips on my stories, so I'd love to connect with you there as well. Again, that's @littlenutrition is my handle. Anyways, until next episode, see you then. Bye.